You are now listening to the Hunter's Advantage podcast. We preserve the history and sport of hunting through curious conversation and action-packed hunts, as well as offering you tips and strategy for more successful hunts. The Hunter's Advantage podcast is powered by Out on a Limb Manufacturing. Out on a Limb is a family-owned company based right here in Oklahoma that makes tree stands, saddle platforms, climbing sticks, and so much more.
Christian, I have a quick question.
What's that?
What bites down harder, a hippo or an alligator?
No idea.
It's a trick question. The Ridge Runner 2.0 bites harder than both of them. But all jokes aside, we use these products all across the land on public or private. These help us get into any tree we want and hunt where the deer actually are.
Most men go to the grocery store for their meat, but these products help you go to God's grocery store. I have used the Out on a Limb Ridge Runner 2.0 and the Shakar sticks for the last few years hunting public land bucks, and I've actually shot several bucks out of this setup. If you want to support the podcast and get some Out on a Limb equipment, make sure to go to outonalimbmfg.com and use code HNTA10 for 10% off at checkout. Once again, if you want to support the podcast, go to outonalimbmfg.com and use code HNTA10 at checkout for 10% off. Now let's get back to the podcast. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Hunter's Advantage podcast, episode number 170. And today we're joined by Warren Holder of Raised Hunting. Thanks for jumping on with us and dealing with my technical difficulties for 15 minutes. So we appreciate it.
Absolutely. Jake and I discussed lots of stuff while we waited on Christian while he was being tardy.
Yeah, you know, like J-hook and scrapes, how the pyramids got there, simple stuff like that.
Yep.
Just the easy stuff.
I think that's what happens to some of our big bucks half the time. You know, whatever was messing with the pyramids and doing all that stuff, that's where some of those deer go. They just vanish.
In the black hole, yep.
Yep, exactly.
There is a bunch of them that you never hear about them getting shot. You never find a deadhead. You never hear them from them again. And I think that's probably what happens to them.
There is some to me that it is really weird. Like a few, you know, that some of these, like I've seen a couple guys, especially here in Iowa, that show me pictures of deer that are like, you know, stupid big, like 230 plus type big. And then they never got any other pictures of them, never found sheds, never found the deer. And nobody ever knew what happened to them. And to me, those ones, it's like, where did that deer go? Because I think if somebody poached that one, I just don't think they could keep their mouth shut. You know, I think if somebody shoots a 230, 40 plus inch deer, he may be able to keep his mouth shut for like a year. But after that, I think that he's going to open up his mouth and you'd hear about it. So to me, it's like, they died in such a random spot that nobody found them at all? And they just squirrels ate them or what? I don't know. It seems so weird.
Do you know Brian Andrews? So I forget what state it was, but he was like, I don't know, 14 or 16 years old. And he killed like the state record from whatever state he was in. I forget which one, but he had it mounted, scored, and it would like took the record. But one evening when him and his parents and stuff went out to eat and they came back, the buck mount vanished from their like living room wall. And since then it has not been found. This is like, I think early 2000s, but it's never been talked about. Like no one's came up and said, "Oh yeah, I took the buck" or whatnot. So, I mean,
that was an Iowa deer though, right? I think I've heard that story. Now.
I'm not sure.
It might have been.
I think it was actually. I think it was right before like the Beatty buck. And it was a huge, like 230 or something like that. Really big deer.
Yeah. It was huge. But yeah. Still yet they haven't found it. But Christian, I know you were kind of late on this conversation, but Warren's in his living room, and I think we just need to appreciate his backdrop a little bit because
it's hard not to appreciate. Holy crap, that's awesome!
Yeah,
you got the camera angle right.
Yeah, I made my poor girlfriend help me as soon as I got that elk back right there. You know, I was like, we gotta set it up just so that I can see it. And so she's over there struggling with it, helping me put up this humongous bull on the wall. And then she's like, "It's not going to stay there, right?" You know? And I was like, I knew as soon as we got it up there, like there was no way she was going to be able to help me get it down. And so he sticks out like way into my living room, but it's worth it for now. So I'm good with it.
For once, you were the one standing back and just like a little bit to the left. And then she was just
Oh.
sitting there like cranking it. And you're like, a little bit back.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Payback.
Yeah. We've got a good problem because like my deer from last year is still on the ground over here. I'm still trying to figure out where I'm gonna put him. Like that grate really irritates me because if they hadn't put that grate right there, I think I could fit like 3 more heads in here.
Dude,
I guess I gotta deal with it.
who cares about airflow, dude? You can get that in where you're sleeping. Just take that thing out and put a couple mounts up.
I know. I was like, you guys could have put this anywhere, and you guys chose the one like big open wall that I've got and stuck it right in the middle. So,
yeah, I can tell that you haven't had a woman's influence too much because that's exactly what my living room would look like if Laura and I weren't like if she didn't have like free reign of the house. Is exactly what it would look like.
she heard you say that, and she's like, "Oh no." Half of them are hers. Like I got one over, like that one right there. We just got that one back. That's her pedestal right there.
Mm-hmm.
So
Jeez.
that's the way you do it. You gotta let them kill them too, and then they don't complain as much. When you got them absolutely full. So I mean,
I know you're going to get a stern talking to after we get off this podcast.
I got sheds in here and everything, so
living the dream.
Yep, I plant them every once in a while to make sure that she finds some, so that it's okay for me to leave them in the living room.
But you found that one.
Exactly.
That's awesome. So we talked about a little bit before the podcast. You are originally from Montana and then moved to Iowa. What was the rationale behind that? And then can you also talk a little bit about raised hunting and just kind of the familial hunting environment you grew up in?
Yeah, man. So I grew up in Great Falls, Montana, which, if you're familiar with Montana at all, is basically the center of the state. So outdoor opportunities, like hunting opportunities, it's probably one of the best places that you could ever live. It's got mountains. You got you could hunt elk, mule deer, whitetail deer, black bears, antelope, turkeys. I mean, just an abundance of wildlife and some of the best fishing. And so I grew up in Great Falls, and my mom was a financial advisor and my dad was a full-time firefighter. And so he was a full-time firefighter until he was like, I think 40 or 41 for the Great Falls Fire Department. And he herniated 2 discs in his back. And so when he herniated those 2 discs in his back, they forced him into retirement. They said that we can't have you on the department. You could be a liability. Because I guess technically once you herniate a disc, there's like weight limits that you're not supposed to carry more than or do more physical activity than. So they basically forced him into retirement. And at that point, he didn't really know what he was going to do. And so my mom got a job offer in Whitefish, Montana. Whitefish, Montana is the northwest corner of Montana, and it's completely different than like central Montana. There's a lot of tree huggers, like basically all. So I went from a school where everybody either was a hunter or a rancher to one where all people did was smoke weed and ski. Like there was,
and probably had blue hair.
Yeah, blue hair ladies.
Yeah, it was super loaded, like super rich. Like you drive into the Whitefish parking lot, and I'm talking like Mercedes-Benz and BMWs, and like it was a completely different world than what I'd grown up in. And I had 4 other kids that I went to school with at that school that hunted. So I went from one totally different extreme to another one. And the other part of it was the hunting around there sucked. I mean, it was terrible. There was more public land opportunities, national forest than you could ever dream of. But between the wolves, the mountain lions, and the grizzly bears, the population had just been decimated. All your deer and elk had just been just destroyed. I mean, we've got trail camera pictures of literally dozens of grizzlies on these little logging roads and stuff, just all the time. And so basically we just didn't mesh very well once we moved up there. And then in Montana, it's such a big state. We were still having to drive 6, 7, 8 hours across the state to go hunting in our old places. And my dad had always been kind of a hardcore whitetail guy. And so they started looking at different job opportunities and looking around the nation. They're like, well, if we're not going to stay in the West, and the only place we would really even look at would be like Iowa. I think Iowa was the only Midwestern state that they'd even considered. Otherwise, it was going to be South Dakota, Wyoming, Montana still. And so then they found Winterset, Iowa, flew here, and basically they did a tour around Winterset and decided they thought that we would like it. And so they came back and like, you guys want to move to Iowa or do you want to stay in Montana? And for me, it was an easy decision because my dad explained the tag process to me. He's like, so for residents, we can get a tag in Iowa every year, and then we can still go to Montana at that time as a non-resident and still get a tag. So I was like, okay, so we can deer hunt, better deer hunting and elk hunting. And then we were looking at our antelope spot in Wyoming, which was like 12 hours or so from where we lived in Montana. And it was 12 hours from where we were going to be in Iowa. And so that's just how big the state is. You know, even though Wyoming was the next state, it was still, you know, a 12, 13-hour drive. And so then they're like, you guys want to try and move to Iowa? I was like, absolutely. Because I hated the school I went to. I did not get along with any of the people. And so I was good with it. So as a junior, we moved to Winterset, excuse me. And so at that point, that's when my dad was we'd filmed all of our hunts and stuff since I was 8 years old. And he kind of got his, I don't know if it was even really a start, but he worked with Primos in, I don't know, probably the early 2000s, something like that. He was like, back when, you know, being, I guess I don't know how to, it was a big deal to be a Primos pro staffer back then. Like it was
before really the time of pro staffs, by the way.
Yeah. Like it was, I don't want to just say he was a pro staffer, you know, because like it was not, to get on a Primos pro staff back 20 years ago was not like a simple thing. Like it was a super extensive interview process. And then if you got selected, Will Primos called you himself and, you know, put you on the team. And so he went from just being a pro staff guy to the Western promotional coordinator. And then ended up going on a lot of hunts for him, either calling or running a camera, and just really became good friends with all of the Primos team. And we still are good friends with them to this day. But anyways, he never had an intention or anything, but he filmed all my hunts, all my little brothers, and we'd been filming all his hunts. I filmed the first thing I ever filmed him shoot, I think was Miriam turkey when I was 8. And so like we'd had literally hundreds of kills on video and never had an intention to doing anything with them. But when we moved to Winterset, he was like, you know, I want to try and make a hunting show, but I want to make a hunting show that's a different hunting show. And his goal around that was really to make sure that it related to people and had a powerful message and show the life lessons that can be taught through hunting, not really have it to be about hunting, you know, just something that is taught through hunting. And so we moved here and he found a guy that he felt was capable of editing it and displaying the image that he wanted through, or telling the story that he wanted through the imagery. And so that's kind of how we started. We sent in a pilot episode to the Outdoor Channel. So back then you had to, I would imagine it's probably still the same today. You had to send in a pilot episode, and then the network would review it and say, hey, we want this show on our network, or we don't want this show on our network. Now it might be where, as long as you are willing to pay for the airtime, that they'll take it. I'm not sure. But back then it wasn't. When we started 10 years ago, like they still had to approve it and decide that they wanted it. And so you submitted that pilot episode. So we submitted our pilot episode and they loved it. And basically it went from there. And so then it's been more than we probably ever thought it would be over the last 10 years.
Yeah, how many like seasons worth of content did you guys have? Like, did you do the first season on all the other stuff that you had and like kind of in the bank, or like and start hunting the second season for new stuff, or how did that work?
So we actually had, that was what was really nice about it, is we did have a ton of stuff in the bank, but we were still having to tie it to relevant, timely stuff. Right. So like if we killed a deer, we may be going back into the archives and going into older footage. But at that time, we weren't filming that video for any kind of intention. So we didn't have, any kind of storyline to go along with that. We may have the shot and the recovery and us talking about stuff, but there wasn't enough to actually build an episode out of it. So we tied that stuff in, but we still had to use relevant, timely stuff of deer we killed that year or hunts we went on.
So you said you were 8 when you first filmed that Miriam?
I was 8. Yep.
So instead of, the dad that makes you hold the flashlight, it was like, hold the damn flashlight. It was the camera.
Yeah, it was. I always knew I'm not that patient now, and I really knew I wasn't patient then because I think I made it to like 9 before I was like, all right, Dad, I'm pretty tired of having to film you shoot stuff. Like, I want to shoot something. And in Montana, you had to be 12 before and have your hunter ed and everything before you could actually go and shoot something. And so he made me wait till I was 11. When I was 11, then he took me to Idaho. They either didn't have any age restriction or it was 11 in Idaho. I can't remember which one it was. And so he took me to Idaho, and I got to kill a turkey when I was 11 in Idaho. And so that was the first one that I got to shoot. And so it was pretty cool.
So, go ahead.
Go ahead, Jake.
No, all I was going to say, so looking at your wall and stuff, you have a pretty diverse selection of species hanging on your back behind you. Where do you rank deer within that?
Oh, number 2.
What's number 1?
Elk, bar none. Like not even a question.
I typically would ask you why, but I can kind of understand that.
Have you ever gone elk hunting?
I wouldn't call it that.
Yeah, it's more like a very good donation to Colorado, and then just a disappointing drive home. That's all it was.
Anytime I hear Colorado, I'm like, I probably know how that outcome went. Was it all public land stuff?
Yes.
Sadly.
Yeah, man, you didn't go out
too good.
Yeah, you went to like
we went on a camping trip.
Yeah, pretty much. You took your bow on a hike. Elk hunting, which I think that's something that's really kind of interesting about public land hunting, especially Colorado, is like what you're really trying to do there is probably one of the most difficult things, right? Like you're trying to go and hunt the most educated elk, the most pressured elk, in the places that are the most difficult, opposed to maybe a limited tag draw, right? Where there's nowhere near as many people or a private ranch or something to that effect. So I think that I have respect for those guys that go and do that. But I remember the first time I went to Colorado, I talked to a lot of guys and just, talking to them around there, like, oh, it's pretty good. We kill an elk or two every 5 years. And I was like, every 5 years. And they were happy with that. And which is, my hat's off to them because I'd have a hard time being good with that. But I think that they'd never experienced anything else. And that was just like normal. Because there's a lot of other opportunities where you can get into elk, but I think Onyx is great, but all the tools, Onyx, base map, all of them, everything that's made the West so much more accessible has changed the landscape of that a little bit. Now it's a lot easier for people to figure things out and know how to go hunting out West, or at least where to start, but there's just more pressure.
Well, if it takes the average person 5 years, like probably good hunters 5 years to get one on public, then it would probably take me 10. And at that rate, you're looking at what? That'd be almost $7,000 worth of tags.
I think they're more expensive now. I think they're like more than 700 now.
And then by that point, it's just like, well, heck, I could have went on a pretty good guided hunt for that.
And we tell people that all the time, and they don't believe us. They're like, I really want to go elk hunting, but I want to learn to go and do it myself. What should I do? And we tell them, go to the guide. And they're like, what? And we're like, if you want to learn, if you want to truly learn and figure out what the elk do and how elk are supposed to act and how elk are supposed to behave, go with a guide, because you're trying to learn so much information in such a short period of time that you're better off going with somebody who knows what they're doing and knows the area and knows where elk are, and then getting to see how elk are supposed to act, right? Like when you call to a bull that's by himself and freaking out and he comes to you, right? Or he tries to circle down your wind, whatever the instance is, at least it gives you the ability to learn how elk are supposed to behave. Because there's absolutely guys that are going and killing bulls, probably really good bulls every year on Colorado in public, I'm sure, and over the counter units. But those guys have probably, they either took a long time to figure it out, or they learned from somebody else that was able to show them. I think like going Colorado public over the counter elk has got to be one of the most difficult things. And so that when I say elk hunting, that's not the elk hunting I'm talking about doing. I'm talking like, where you get to get up in the morning and you get on a ridge and it's a friggin' awesome sunrise and you hear bulls like that just screaming their heads off. That to me is the elk hunting that I'm talking about.
Yeah, I've gotten so much more interested in the kind of the draw aspect of hunting the West, and I've been putting in for a lot more draws recently just because I'm like, hey, I'd rather wait 3 or 4 or 5 years and know when I'm going, I'm hunting not an unpressured animal, because I don't think that exists, but how an elk should actually behave or how a muley should actually behave. And I'm willing to wait longer now for those really, really good draws than I used to be, because I don't want to waste money and stuff on the over counter stuff anymore like that.
Yeah. Well, that's hopefully, I mean, I hope you guys do have lots of listeners because I want you guys to be successful, but hopefully you don't have too many, because I might be about to give out all my tips. But like the way that I would say to do that is if you put in for several different states, right? Like at least 4 or 5 different states, and you start building those points in each of those states, technically every year you could be drawing somewhere that takes 3-4 points per unit, right? And so now you're not having to do the waiting for 3 or 4 years to draw a better unit. You're going every year still, but you're not having to go to an over the counter unit.
Yeah, that's a good point. I've went nuts on the amount of money I've spent on, like I put in for 15 hunts yesterday just for Texas alone. And granted, I mean, they're like $1 or $3 or $10 a piece, but I was just like, I want my names in as many. Your likelihood goes way up. And like you said, instead of waiting 4 or 5 years, you might be lucky enough to get one every year.
Yeah. Well, I think that was just funny. You spent all this money and then you're like, they're only like, some of them were $1 or $2, so you dropped a $20 bill, you went nuts. Cause some of them, man,
Crazy.
you could spend several hundred to a couple grand, if you're doing like the moose, goat, and sheep and everything else, you could spend so much money putting in for tags.
Oh, it's the reason I did not apply for New Mexico this year. I think they required like you to pay all of it up front. And obviously like Kansas used to do it for whitetail. They switched off of it, but a lot of those states require you to pay whatever it is up front. And it's like, I don't want $2,500 just hanging out in, Wonderland for 2 months while I wait on it to get this drawback. And the thing is, I probably am not going to draw. So, I mean,
right.
Yeah, there's a balance there.
What kind of stuff you put in for in Texas?
Oh, they have a lot. Muley, they have a bighorn, exotics, antelope. Several of the species on the slam are on there. But gosh, I was looking at the odds. It was nuts. They're like, all right, we got 8 tags and there's 9,000 applicants. And I'm like, okay, well, I don't even know if this is worth $1 to put in for it.
Right. What is the mule deer like odds? Is that
really no, it's bad too. It's like 8 out of 4,000 or something like that.
Holy
but yeah. I bet you if you drew out, it would be.
I bet it's awesome.
I bet you it'd almost be 100% shot rate, you would think, with only 8 tags.
The success rate on a lot of those muley hunts are like 50% with a bow. You think about how many people can't shoot a bow 20 yards, and it's like 50% with a bow is incredible odds for the average person, people that draw out. So I think it's really, really good if you can get it drawn. It's just that's kind of the issue.
Well, they're probably holding out for better deer too. If they draw that, I'd imagine there's got to be pretty big deer in those units if it's that hard to draw.
Oh yeah, for sure. So you put in for a lot of the Western stuff. Do you put in for multiple species? Like, are you just mainly putting in for elk?
No, I put in for multiple species, mostly elk and mule deer. To me, I guess I might now start putting in for moose, goat, and sheep and stuff like that. But I've always just figured I had better odds of just working hard and trying to make the amount of money to go and pay for a moose hunt than I did to actually draw one, because the odds are similar to that. Like they're really, really low. And two, I guess I've always looked at if I could go on a Yukon moose hunt opposed to like a Shiras moose hunt, where the odds of me drawing the Shiras moose hunt is nowhere near as good, and they're a lot smaller bulls than a Yukon. I was like, I feel like I should just try to work harder and make more money to be able to get the opportunity to go to the Yukon, because my odds of drawing a moose, goat, or sheep does not look very good.
So wait, why? How is are Shiras more rare or because I always thought
they're smaller. So you have 3 species of moose. You have the Shiras moose, which is what we have in the lower 48. So Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, lower 48 is all Shiras. And then Canada has the Canadian moose, and they're a little bit bigger. And then in Alaska is where you have your Yukon moose, and your Yukon moose are significantly larger than a Shiras moose. So they're quite a bit bigger than a Canadian too, honestly.
Yeah, but what I was saying is I would think the Yukon would be harder to draw for than the Shirish, or that's how you say it, I think.
You can buy a tag through an outfitter for Yukon guaranteed. Or Shiras, okay. you may never draw, so that's your difference too, is if you have bonus points or preference points, right? So some states do a bonus point where that just means that my name and Jake and Christian, you each go in the hat just another time every single year, but there's no hierarchy to that. Where your preference points, if you have a true preference point, if I have 5 points and you have 4 points and you have 3 points, then I draw first, and then they go to Jake and then they go to Christian, which I think Montana does all theirs through bonus points. I think Wyoming does too, for like moose, goat, and sheep. And so like when I lived in Montana, my best friend, he drew a moose tag when he was 12. First time ever putting into it. Yeah, draws a moose tag, and his dad was a firefighter too, and half the firefighters were like legit pissed at this poor 12-year-old.
Screw this kid.
Yeah, exactly, because they'd been putting in for like 45 years and hadn't drawn, and the kid first year draws.
So, we have an Oklahoma like elk hunt, and it's very sought after, and it's with a rifle. And I saw a guy in a forum the other day. There's some folks that have 27, 30 points. They've been putting in half their life for this tag. And there was a guy that he was like, got my tag. And, everyone's like, well, how many points did you have? He said 3. People were like, oh, screw you, man. I got 27 points. Everybody was so pissed at him.
Yeah. So to answer your question, I guess, it's drawing a Shiras is way harder than being able to go and hunt Yukon.
Yeah, it's wild. I wouldn't have thought that.
Yeah. Now the money thing could be a lot different though, because even 10 years ago, I think Yukon moose were more like around the $20,000 mark, $25,000 mark. And I think now they're like, I don't know if you're going to, I don't know, cause I haven't really looked, but from what I've heard, I think it's like 35, 40 grand is like the minimum, unless you do it on your own, which that's an option too. I had a guy that brought me a moose 2 years ago to score for him. And he went on his own, and he's a doctor, and he's like 62 years old. And the moose was so big that he was like 5'6", and he's got pictures of him packing it out, and he couldn't stand straight up. And it was a humongous moose, and he did that all on his own and everything. And I think they were under 10 grand for the whole thing. Like they paid somebody to fly him in and everything.
Do you not need an outfitter to hunt Alaska if you're a non-resident?
Where they were, I guess I don't think you do, or they had something where the outfitter was the one that flew them in. I don't know the ins and outs, so I don't want to say too much on it because I'm not super sure on how exactly it works. But I know that like if you have the money and you want to go and hunt a Yukon moose, you can do that. If you have the money and you want to go and hunt a Shiras moose, you still have to draw, unless they probably have a governor's tag for it, but that's probably going to be even more than a Yukon.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's wild. That is wild.
I like it's interesting too, because the sheep stuff I've looked at some of the sheep, and they're 20, 25 year tags, and they, but if you go to the res, like they'll do lottery tag, like to the highest bidder. And it's like,
I'm sure
$75K, $100,000 for one animal. That is just insane to me that people do that.
I've heard that the sheep hunters, that one, they have a lot of money, because I think it takes a lot of money to go do like a sheep slam. And then those guys too seem to get totally addicted to it. I haven't even looked at the sheep much. I think it'd be cool, but it's just out of my realm of possibility at this point.
Yeah. Well, no, if you sell your house and your truck and stuff, you could definitely hunt one.
I know, right? Yeah. Then I would definitely be a bachelor.
Yeah, for sure. So what have you been up to this summer for, the whitetails? Obviously you're in the whitetail mecca in Iowa, or at least one of the meccas. What have you been doing this summer to locate big bucks?
Obviously been doing some driving around. But my dad and my brother give me a lot of crap because I'm a lazy whitetail hunter. I don't do a lot until in August. I'll start putting out some more cameras, but I really don't do a lot this time of year. I'll drive around just because I love looking at deer and trying to find good deer. But as far as like really trying to put in a lot of time to find a deer to kill during fall, I don't spend that much time on them during the summer, just because I believe that most of my success comes from during fall. I think a lot of our deer here in Iowa, they seem to have these little ranges where, sometimes you'll have a deer that his home range is the same. Summer, he's in the same place. Winter, he's in the same place. And fall, he's in the same place. And then you'll have other deer where they'll summer one place and then they go somewhere else for the rut or for fall. And then you'll have others that, they'll winter somewhere else and they'll summer somewhere else and then they'll rut somewhere else. So I don't put a ton of weight into what the deer that I have during the summer, because I don't know that they're going to be there during the fall. So I guess I didn't really answer your question at all. The answer would be is I drive around some and then that's about it. I'm pretty lazy.
Well, no, that kind of makes sense because the private piece I hunt, it is not a summer home to hardly any good buck. They mainly start coming in probably mid-October, but like you can dump corn, mineral, whatever you want to do, and they're just not there during the summer.
Dude, I love those places though.
Well, I would rather have that rather than the opposite, where they summer and then they're just nowhere to be found during the good stuff. But I think it's a good spot.
I love that stuff because that's one thing I won't do. Like my dad and brother, they'll put out cameras, June 1, and I hate doing that. Because like then you'll see a deer that right? And I just feel like every time you look at him, it'll be like June 19th, and you'll be looking at that deer, and you're like, he's not gonna be as big as he was last year. I think he went downhill, and the deer still has a month and a half of growing to do, and so that drives me nuts. They'll be looking
start getting in your own head.
Yeah, they're like, I don't think he's going to be as big, or where's this deer? Is he dead? And so I just I'm going to wait till my minimum is always like July 15th. I'll wait till July 15th because then if I do put out cameras, at least can have like an idea of what they are or what they're going to be. And if it's a deer I know, a lot of times I think you can recognize them by July 15th. And so I don't want to get too wrapped up into them until we get actually a little bit closer to the season.
Well, that and plus the cost of lithium batteries are higher than all get out. But yeah,
and
no.
Yeah,
that ain't no kidding. That ain't no kidding. How many cameras do you all usually run?
I usually run about 10. And then my little brother, my dad runs like 30 to 40.
Good God.
Cell cams?
Not cell cams.
Oh,
yeah, not cell cams. He probably only runs like 3 or 4 cell cams, which he has a hard time getting in the app. So he doesn't do much on the cell cams. And then my little brother, he'll probably run like 15 regular cameras and 3 or 4 cell cams. And then I'll usually run 10 cell cams and maybe 1 or 2 regular cameras if I don't have any service. So I dig the cell cams just for the information.
Yeah, I have a property that I hunt quite a bit, and I'm kind of with you on the summer thing because it seems to be kind of a summer hub. Like, I don't know, between June and mid-August, there might be 10 or 15 different bucks on this 100-acre piece. And it's kind of like a sick game because you just watch them fall off one by one by one. And then eventually you're left with like 2 or 3 that are going to stay. And you kind of just hope it's the good ones. And it's kind of a torture in the summer watching them leave one by one and just hoping the good one stays.
Oh yeah. We had a deer we called Ralph. That was a big deer. Like in his peak, he was probably 190 plus. And every year we'd never get velvet pictures of him. And we had pictures of that deer for 6 years straight. And I think during those 6 years, I think I have like 6 velvet pictures of him. And 6 were all from 1 year. I don't know what was different about that year, but he decided to show up 6 times during that 1 year in velvet. Other than that, we never had a velvet picture of him. So I know that somebody else would get pictures of him all summer long, and he'd just be this tank, and that he left every single year. And it had to just drove him up a wall. And then we had another one I ended up killing this deer that we called Bullwinkle. I don't know if you can see that there.
Yeah.
And he was same exact way. Like he would just never, ever give us any velvet pictures. And then, but by like October 15th, October 20th, he'd show up every year. You knew it. As long as he didn't get killed, he would be there. So I don't know where he would summer. I don't know what he did. My deer last year, same thing. I actually didn't know that deer the year prior. So I just knew of him the season of 2021, fall season 2021, got pictures of him all the way through January. That was one of the few times I did go put out cameras, I think like by July 1 or first week of July, hoping that I was going to get pictures of this deer. Because I thought that he lived there, but I wasn't sure because I didn't start hunting that property until November of that year or October, and never got pictures of him. And then October 2nd, I got a picture of him on a cell cam at 6 a.m. And so he wasn't there all summer. And I mean, I did a lap that evening, and sure enough, the neighbors had cut their corn on like 2 different sides. And so I think that he just didn't summer there. Deer wasn't there. And then as soon as they cut that corn, he moved back in.
Yeah. Is there anything that you do when you set out your cameras in July, or let's say it kind of sounds like you're creeping a little bit more towards August, to ensure you get quite a few pictures? Like, do you set cameras up over water holes? Do you set mineral out? Like, what's your kind of general thoughts for getting summer pictures, even though maybe they don't matter as much?
Well, and I think they can matter too, because there's some deer, I believe that some deer, they'll never leave. That is their home range, and that during summer, winter, fall, they're there all the time, and then it just depends on the deer. They all have their different personalities, but we'll do a few things. One, mineral works really well. I mean, mineral is a great way to get photos of deer. Now, however, here us in Iowa, once you get to season, you can't have mineral out. And so we actually put all of ours in. If we're going to put mineral somewhere, we put it in a bucket. And so that way, once that time period comes, then we just pull the whole bucket, and we don't have to worry about it getting into the ground. Because if it gets into the ground, then technically you're supposed to either put like a piece of plywood over it or a tarp, or dig up the ground. And we just don't want to have any questions about it. So we just put it in a bucket. And so if we, in a rare occasion, that we get a lot of rain, then we have to go in and check it, so that it doesn't overflow. But so far, the last 4 years, we haven't had that problem in Iowa with that much rain. And then honestly, too, we'll start putting out, water holes are great, and we'll start putting out scrapes. We'll even start scrapes in like August. A lot of times on field edges, it seem to be a little bit better food sources like bean fields. And it's not the same as October or November, where they're hitting it all the time. But, deer communicate year round. They'll hit those scrapes, and it's a great way to get inventory without having to get pictures of 500 does as well. So that's been kind of a slick trick that we've started doing, was just putting out some scrapes, and we realized, hey, a doe will come check them, but you don't have to deal with sifting through 400 pictures of does for $3 or $4.
I've found so many evenings, like I'll be scrolling through about as fast as you can, getting all the grass, all the does through my cell cams in the summer. And I've went back like weeks before, just like in bed at night, scrolling and being like, oh, I missed that one. And it's because I got so used to just scrolling through, getting rid of all of those does. So I feel that I've missed some good bucks doing that.
I'm sure they'll have AI soon that will recognize bucks. And
Moultrie actually does, I think, right now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like they have an identifier thing, and I don't know if it's good or not. I haven't used it, but I know it's out there.
Stealth Cam does that as well on their app. You can somehow try to sort between does and bucks, and for the most part it works, but I don't trust that stuff yet. So I always go through them manually and just check it.
That was going to be my next thing, is how long until you are willing to trust it? Because I feel like the one time I trust it, that's when there's going to be an absolute tanker that I'd never seen.
So I think you touched on it a second ago, that buck you killed last year. What was his name? Magnum?
Yep, Magnum.
He was in the 170s, right?
176, yep.
176. Dadgum. So are you the big dog in the household now, or does someone else have that? I
have more big ones, but my dad still got the biggest. So he killed a deer, and I know you guys have seen some of our TikTok stuff. So that one was all over TikTok last year. He's 179 and 7/8. And as a straight 8, he's 169 and 7/8. And we called that deer Juice. I mean, he's an absolute unit. I mean, he's an unbelievable deer. And the reason we called him Juice is because from 3 to 4, it looked like he got on steroids. You know, he just everything about
juice.
Yeah, he was on the juice. And so East and I started calling him Juice just because he just, like, even aside from his headgear, his body was humongous. I mean, we got these pictures of him with these other deer in the same photo, and like, he was a legit 10 inches taller than them. And jacked. Like, I mean, the deer just had muscle. I mean, when he killed him, he was 240 pounds dressed. And I think it was November 12th or 13th, you know, so he'd been chasing does for probably at least 2 weeks, and he'd lost an eye. Like that. And the deer he was an unbelievable buck. And he was the best deer you could ever had to try to hunt that was that big, because he was like a typical 8, you know, where he just wanted to fight everybody and had a bad attitude. But he was 180. So that was the best scenario you could have ever had.
So he had you by 3 inches. So I don't understand. Do you keep your composure? Like when you see a deer of that caliber come walking through, like what's going through your mind at that point?
I do a pretty good job keeping my composure, because I've found systems that I can implement. And for me, it's as soon as I recognize that it's a deer I want to kill or an animal that I want to kill, then I try not to think about anything else as far as that animal, right? All I'm looking at is just absolutely staring at where I want to hit. And so I'm just looking right behind their shoulder and just staring at that. And then I think for experienced hunters like ourselves, you know, you're subconsciously kind of looking at, okay, when should I draw? Roughly how far is he? Where does it look like he's going to walk to? You may be thinking, why wind is kind of cutting like this, I can't let him get to here. All that stuff is being processed at the same time. But the only thing that I'm really making sure that I'm mentally focusing on is where I want to hit. And I just absolutely stare at that. Like when I'm saying I'm staring at, like, that's all I'm thinking about. That's all I'm looking at. I won't look to the left. I won't talk to my cameraman. I won't do anything but just stare at that. And I think is what happens then is, like every animal that you shot with a bow, how many times do you remember putting the pin on it?
Very rarely.
And
I'll be honest.
Me too. There's not a lot. I remember putting the pin on him. I don't know why. Probably because he was so big that I just remembered that all of my pins fit. just pull the trigger, you know, like they're all there. Just shoot. And so anyways, though, is what I think happens is that that's why we practice so much, is I think that no matter, you can only control those emotions to such a high extent, which is why we somewhat love that anticipation in those few seconds, is because of that excitement. And so I think that by staring at where you want to hit is what happens, is that your subconscious mind, when you get to full draw, you may check out mentally as far as being the one in control, but everything else that you've done all summer long, practicing, shooting your bow, making sure that you're ready, goes to the last thing that your mind was focused on, which was where to hit that animal. And so then I think your pin naturally goes there, and it just happens. So I stay pretty dang controlled until I've cut that arrow loose. And even after that, I try to stay. Magnum really riled me. I don't know why. After I let the arrow loose, I think it's because he was like, when my arrow hit him, it was right behind a branch, and so I couldn't tell exactly where I hit him. And it was only like 3 minutes after shooting light, so I had a really hard time being able to tell exactly where I hit. And it felt good, so like I thought that I hit him good, but it was also, I actually shot him like in a cow pasture, so I couldn't hear him run off. I couldn't hear it crash. So here I knew I just shot probably the biggest deer of my life, but I wasn't sure where the hit was, and so I was kind of a wreck then. But 99% of the time, I'm stone cold until I let that arrow loose, and then I lose it. But that's the only reason I've been able to do that now, is because I've found some system. And the reason I had to do that is because I was missing so much stuff before.
I've been using the new Exodus Rival cell camera for the last couple months, and I have found a beautiful mainframe 8-point with tons of stickers to go after this fall.
Ooh.
One thing I do appreciate about Exodus trail cameras is all of the cameras share the same data plan, so you only pay for what you need. A lot of cell cam companies charge you for HD pictures. I've seen prices of $5 for 50 HD pics. Exodus is going to give you unlimited HD pictures right to your phone, which is awesome when you're sitting there in the middle of the summer and it's 100 degrees and you just want to binge a bunch of trail cam photos.
If you're looking for a solid cell camera with great performance and a 5-year no BS warranty, go check them out. So as we all know, hunting gear is something people can make way too complicated. Arrows can be the exact same way. Instead of going down all those rabbit holes, trying to sift through the endless information that's online and you're not really sure if it's right or wrong, Exodus makes it simple to get the right arrow for your exact setup.
So go online to the Exodus Arrow Builder. It takes less than a minute. You're going to enter your draw weight, your draw length, and how heavy of a point you're shooting. And it's going to be that simple. Let the guys at Exodus take care of the rest.
So if you're interested in Exodus rival cell cameras or a new set of their MMT arrows, just go to ExodusOutdoorGear.com and use code HA15 for 15% off anything on their website.
Once again, that is ExodusOutdoorGear.com. Use code HA15 at checkout for 15% off. Now let's get back to the podcast.
So
I think it kind of goes in phases because before that's exactly my thought process was like, okay, let's read the room. You know, is there a doe somewhere? Is he being skittish? You know, how's the wind? Like 100% read the room, grab your bow. But the thing is I was right there with you on basically just blacking out and then just going by muscle memory, like just training to do that. And like, because I already knew my mind was just going to go bananas. And so I just had to rely on the muscle memory. Well, we talked to Joel Turner the other day, and I was kind of trying to give him the same spiel you just did, which you did it way better than I could. But he was basically was just like, you know, muscles don't have memory. Yeah, and he was basically just saying muscles don't have memories. And like the way he was putting it, it was really eye-opening. Just like talk yourself through the shot rather than just going through muscle memory, because that can fail. And that kind of proved it last year when we were on some Oklahoma public, and it was like day 4 or 5 of like a 7-day hunt. And of course, where we hunt in Oklahoma, you know, it's super wooded where you can't really see 20, 30 yards, you know, sometimes in some areas. And then low deer density, so you might only see one decent buck a trip usually. And of course, it's day 3 or 4, and after moving so many times and, you know, getting skunked, and then somebody else seeing some, you know, you're just like, oh, I just need something to happen for me, or else I'm just going to drive myself crazy. I'm just going to go back and sleep in the truck and then tell somebody I didn't see anything because I'd see just as many deer in the truck. Well, the way that morning started was I drive to the spot. I get about halfway out there and I'm like, I don't have my release. And I'm like, dadgummit. So I got to walk all the way back to the truck. At this point, it's already starting to get a little bit daylight. And then when I get to the truck, I notice I also don't have my bino harness, which has my rangefinder and stuff in it. So I'm just like, I'm really fumbling this, you know, this morning. So I'm getting upset. I get to my tree finally. And before I get to my tree to start putting my sticks on, I have a doe blowing at me because it's already that gray light. And so I'm like, you know, piss off. And I get like 3 sticks high, and I go to grab my platform, and I had it like, what are those little ties called, Christian? Those little gear ties.
Just
is what
a
it
gear
is.
tie, yeah.
And as soon as I went to reach for it, I don't know if it untangled itself or what, and it drops on the ground. And of course, where we hunt is pretty rocky, smack dab on a rock. And so at this point, the deer starts blowing again. And I'm like, I'm not going to see a dang thing. We're leaving in like 2 days. So I climb back down, shimmy back up the tree, sit there. And before I hang any camera equipment, I hung my bow, thankfully. I'm just sitting there. I'm like, I need a breather or else I'm going to jump headfirst out of this tree. Like, that's just how it's going. And I no longer look to my right and I see a buck. It ain't a huge buck. It's probably like 115, but at that point it might as well have been like a 150 because the thing was trying to get deflated. And so he starts moseying in. He's like 25 yards away probably, but I'm kind of on a hill. So I'm like, that could be 25. That could be 45. I don't know. And so I'm trying to range that thing. And I just can't compose myself on a 115-inch deer. And I'm like, okay, muscle memory, here we go. And I had the yardage wrong because I couldn't like keep my hand still to range it. But I think I would have missed anyways. even if I had the right range, just how bad I was just freaking out. And that kind of made me realize that like maybe the muscle memory isn't too good, at least for me. And so that's kind of a long ramble into I probably won't do the muscle memory thing anymore.
Well, one, I have a question for you, but two, and maybe what I'm doing isn't muscle memory. Maybe it's allowing myself to be able to think through it. I'm not sure. Because like I do know that I'm definitely like if they walk by something I've ranged, or like I knew on that bull, even though all my pins fit on his organs, I still knew he was 25 yards. Because there was two trees that I knew if they walked through that, they were between 24 and 26. And so it was easy to just split pins, right? But I remember thinking he was such a big bull, and that my literally 20, 30, 40, and I think maybe even my 50 were all on his vitals. And so I was like, just squeeze, because they're all there. You can't miss. But maybe is what that's doing is allowing me to slow down and think through that. So what is his suggestion then on how to compose yourself and get yourself to be able to think through it when you have that adrenaline rush?
Well, again, Christian could probably quote this better than I can because he can comprehend stuff a lot better. But he was mainly, I think, just saying that, talk your way through it. And like when you go to aim, you just look at where you want to aim. You put the pin there. Don't try to keep it steady, because somehow you're wired to always go back to the place. Even if your pin's floating, you're always wired to go back to the place where you're trying to aim.
Similar to what he's saying. Like you're saying, you're looking at that spot. That's where your pin's going to go. It might go away from there, but it's coming back. And
And then he was, go ahead.
No, he was just saying that like thoughts aren't thinking. He was like, you have to be conscious and thinking of what you're doing. And he was talking about how the internal dialogue is like how you talk yourself through the shot. And it's not like an external dialogue that he does. It's like an internal, like being conscious, like saying certain words, talking yourself through the shot. And then also I think something different works for everybody, but that's just what he was saying.
Well, I think to me that sounds, I would say that aligns exactly with what I'm saying, because what I'm doing is making sure that I'm present of mind of where I'm focusing on, what I'm going to hit. You know what I'm saying? I'm making sure that I'm not thinking about, holy crap, that's 170 probably, or man, that right side looks good, or holy crap, his body's big. I'm only focused on, we have one mission and one goal, and that's to make sure that arrow goes right where I need it to. And I think there's definitely ways that work for other people. My dad is one of the most lethal people I've ever seen behind a bow, as far as he's not that greatest shot on targets, but you put an animal in front of him in his effective range, and he's one of those people. Like, I think we've all been hunting with a buddy, right? Where, even if it's 20, like we got a 50-50 shot at this. Like, I don't know that it's actually going to happen. And then you got that other buddy that you sit with, and if he comes the full draw, it's dead. Like, that arrow's going where it's supposed to. And that's him with animals. And his method is that he tries to tell himself, this might not happen, or if it doesn't happen, it's okay. There'll be another shot. I'm going to be okay. This isn't going to happen. For me, that doesn't work, because I think that once you get to a certain level as a hunter, when like this animal is definitely going to make it into my shooting window, and I'm going to be able to draw behind that tree. Or whatever it may be, to me, where I'm like, it's going to happen. This is definitely going to happen. He's going to provide me with a shot opportunity. And so that method for me doesn't work, because once my mind is convinced that this is going to happen, then I don't know how to work with it after that point. Because then it's like, well, now what do we do? Like, we're getting a shot, don't get excited yet.
Yeah. You talked about that moment where I think this is one of the reasons I love like trail cameras, and especially cell cameras, so much, is like you spend so much time obsessing over one animal, and then when you see them, it only takes you like 2 seconds to identify what that is. And that happened to me last year, opening day. My biggest buck I've ever shot walks out 25 yards, and I remember turning to my left. I saw him. We didn't lock eyes, but I looked at him for 2 seconds. I go, "Yep," grab my bow. It's like a 1 second decision. You're like, "Yep, that's the one right there," and then anything apart from thinking about where you're going to hit that deer after that I think it's pointless thought. Like, oh my God, that's the biggest deer. I remember as I was watching that deer, my first thought was, that's the biggest deer I've ever seen, or that's the biggest deer I've ever had the opportunity to shoot. And then my second thought was, well, let's shoot him then. Let's quit thinking about how big he is.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that Magnum was the first one where I've actually had a bit of a panic moment in a long time. And that was he ended up coming a lot closer. One, the deer showed up and literally I shot him 3 minutes after shooting light. So it was either at shooting light or a minute after shooting light when we first saw him. And just like you were saying, Christian, like I looked down and just saw the size of the body on the deer, and in my head it was Magnum, right? Like there was no doubt. But I took 2 seconds and checked with my binos, and I told Eli, who was sitting with me, I was like, it's him for sure. And he's just immediately was coming right to us. And so I grabbed my bow and I'm getting ready, and he's like, he was probably 7 yards, right? So he's super close. And I just put my bow in the cab of my truck, and we'd been hunting for a few weeks at this point. So it had gotten pretty dusty. Well, just on my forks, there gotten some dust on the forks. And so when I went to draw, it made like a little squeak, right? And he stopped at that same time. Looking back now, like when I looked at it on the video, I definitely just psyched myself out. Like I think he just naturally stopped. But in my head, I was like, oh my God, he heard it, and now he's alert. And so like that was the first time I've been in a long time where I was somewhat panicking. And so I was like, oh God, no, and then he started cutting out across, I was on this timberline. So he starts cutting across that pasture, and I get to full draw, and I had one window left, which when he was at 18 yards, I mean, it was a pretty good sized window, but I was terrified that he was going to get through that window. So when I man at him, I mean, I was like, man, like way overkill, but I like panicked. But then I was able to keep myself composed enough to calm down and make that shot. And I think that was the reason that I was so nervous afterwards, is because that was the first time that I had any kind of panic in a long time. And so I wasn't 100% confident that I did everything that I needed to make sure that shot was correct. Which in hindsight, I mean, it ended up being perfect, but I remember that was the first time in a long time where I like had panicked because I thought I was about to get busted by the biggest deer of my life.
And do you think you were panicking because or I guess kind of what you just said, do you think you were panicking just because of the release? Like if that would have been another deer that wasn't the biggest buck of your life, would you have panicked as much, you think?
No, I think I was definitely hypersensitive. And I think it's like just going back to like what Christian was talking about, when you're watching one deer or one animal and you're pursuing that one, in my mind, most of the time, I think you guys would probably agree, like I'm probably only going to get one opportunity, and so when that opportunity starts to present itself, like I'm hyper aware of everything going on because I want to make sure that I don't screw up that one opportunity. So I don't think it
pressure cooker.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes. 100%.
Well, I kind of had the opposite experience with like my biggest buck, because it seems like any deer that I have like any history with, it could be I seen it one other time on the hoof like last week, and if I see him again that following week, I'm panicking. But with my biggest deer, like we were chasing this dude all around for like all of late summer and then like all through October and stuff. So we were just like trying to find him. And I didn't even think it was this buck whenever he walked in, but he came in like, when I say 180 degrees behind me, like it was straight behind me. And I thought it was a spike. So there was a spike and a few doe out in front of me that kind of, for some reason started like trotting back behind me. And of course I was just bored. So I was just sitting there grunting at the spike, just passing time. And so I thought it was a spike again, just being dumb. And I go to turn and look, wasn't being stealthy at all, because I thought it was a spike. And I just see the biggest buck of my life. And that was my immediate thought, was that's the biggest buck I've ever seen in my life. And then as soon as I was thinking that, he turns and looks straight up at me. And I'm usually I don't get high in a tree. I was freaking high. And he just turns and looks at me in the eyes. And I'm like, well, no one's going to believe this. So I was like trying to turn on my GoPro. Wasn't even thinking about shooting. I just had a GoPro on my head. I was just slowly reaching up for it. And all of a sudden he kind of looked at me again. And I was like, I'm just going to let it happen. And he just dropped his head, walked around. And at that point, I was like, he's going to run. I already know he's going to run. So like, I'm already in a crap position. I'm just going to do what I can. So I just immediately spun around without even looking at him and grabbed my bow off the hanger and drew back. And he just, no care in the world. But I was like, that was probably the least nervous I've ever been on a deer, just because like I didn't think it was going to work out. I don't know. It was weird.
That's perfect.
Well, I ended up spining it. If that tells you how perfect it was. So,
which was probably double lungs if you were as high up as you're talking about.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
no.
I got all of it.
Not that high.
No, it was a shish kebab, if that makes sense. Just that's
Yeah.
it. That's all she wrote. But yeah,
What?
I don't know. Deer just make people crazy, dude, and
Oh yeah.
I just don't understand it.
Yeah, people, and honestly, I think I've been really fortunate to kill a few good deer. Where to me, I don't get near as wrapped up as a lot of guys I know in the size of the deer, right? And I think that honestly, that ends up helping you kill bigger deer. Because like Magnum, did I want to kill that deer? Yeah, absolutely. But was I good with it if someone else killed him? Yeah. I mean, it wasn't. I was like, there's no way that I'm at a point that I can not be grateful for the deer that I've killed, that I'm going to be that concerned about whether I kill them or not. Like people ask me, then they're like, so why do you chase the biggest deer that you can find? I'm like, the reason I chase the biggest deer that I can find is because I don't want to be done that early. So if I'm going to kill a deer early, then I want it to be a big enough deer that it was worth my hunting season being over in, a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Right. So that's my theory on it is I just want the most time to hunt that I can.
So are you saying, and this might get you canceled after we clip it and put it on TikTok, but are you a size versus age? Like, are you a size guy?
Somewhat. I mean, now they still have to meet a certain age requirement for me.
Okay.
But and I honestly, I'll even take that back to some extent. If there's a deer in a place where I don't have exclusive permission, I just have permission to hunt it, or it's public or something like that, and it's a big deer. Like if I had a public deer that was 160, 170, I don't care if he's 2. I'm going to try and kill that deer.
Oh,
See,
no.
I am the
Exactly
same
how
exact
Jake is.
way. I don't care. People can hate me, and I hate talking about TikTok because then you get called a TikToker, and I think that pisses me off than like other people telling me I do stuff wrong or something. But I haven't shot very many big deer, and the thing is like after I have a few 160s under my belt, sure, I'll consider age, but until that point, it's just like that thing could be 160-inch 1-year-old, and I'd be like, this is as old as he's going to get.
And that's my opinion. 100%. That's the way it should be. I think that you should never. This deer right there, that deer is 172, and he was 4. And I told my dad, told Easton, told everybody that deer's off limits. Nobody's shooting that deer. And as soon as that deer walked within 30 yards, guess what I did? I shot that deer. Yeah. And he was, at the time, he was 25, probably 25 inches bigger than anything I'd ever killed. I mean, and then to me, I realized how stupid I'd sounded, that I was going to ask myself or anybody else to pass up the biggest deer of their entire life, and not by a little bit, but by like a large margin. I think that if you haven't had that opportunity, that's where I think that there gets to be a big misconception or misunderstanding about people like us, right? Because we have a TV show, so automatically people think that we have 10,000 acres to hunt and nobody else can hunt it and everything else, which I wish they were correct, but unfortunately that's not the case. But anyways, like if my neighbor has been hunting hard or something, and he's never killed a deer over 140, and he's a respectful, ethical hunter, and a 173-year-old walks by him and he smokes it, I'm going to be stoked for that dude. Am I going to be a little bit sad that I never got to see what that deer was going to become? Sure, absolutely. But at the same time, I'm super excited for him because that's a big accomplishment for him. And I think that there's way too many people that I've seen now and that I've met and I've talked to that are passing 125, 130, 140 inch deer, trying to do what they see on TikTok or on Instagram and kill 160 and 170 and 180 inch deer. And that's just not realistic for most people. I mean, we have great places to hunt, and 170 inch deer is a big deer. We've been in Iowa now for 10 years. And I'll bet you, I think that the number of confirmed 200s, I think I've I think we've maybe had one, maybe two over 10 years. And so even in Iowa, like a 200-inch deer is astronomically large. And a 170-inch deer is huge too. I think that first people trying to kill the first few deer, yeah, shoot a 120, shoot a 130, whatever gets your heart going. I mean, I shot 150, 60 some inch deer a few years ago, and then I went down to Missouri and I shot a 123-inch deer, and I was stoked about it. Absolutely stoked, because I only had like 3 days to hunt, and it was raining for 2 of the days, and I got a shot at this. To me, I mean, completely different hunt, different circumstances, right? But it's a 120 some inch deer, and I was just as jacked about that deer as I was the 150 that I'd shot.
Yeah. So obviously, I know you're not saying like, I know you're not going to tell anybody to not shoot what they want. This isn't what I'm trying to get out of you. But let's say somebody has shot a 120. Let's say someone has shot a 130. They shot a 140. At what point do you think that person should graduate to the 150 mark and like hold out? Okay.
I think if they're just as stoked about a 130 every time, I think they should shoot it. I don't have any problem with that at all. I mean, if their personal goal is they want to shoot a 150-inch deer, well, then you're going to have to pass the 130s and the 140s to do that. But if they are good with shooting a 130-inch deer every year or 140-inch deer, I don't think that I should ever be the one to tell them that they shouldn't do that. Now, however, on the flip side, this is what I'll also say. I don't think that you should be telling anybody else either that you shouldn't be trying to kill a 6.5-year-old 180-inch deer, right? You never hear that one. It's always, oh, all these people are ruining it. They're trying to kill a big mature deer. What's wrong with that? Why?
That's just more for the other people, to be honest. Like that's the way I think of it.
Well, and if it's okay for us, if we shouldn't be upset if somebody wants to kill a 130-inch deer every year and they don't want to graduate, why should we be mad at a guy that wants to kill a 180-inch deer?
Yeah, I respect that. Well, the reason I'm bringing this up is because it's like a friend-to-friend basis, and I know my Christian's face.
Let's hear it.
I know my Christian's face. Okay, so we've already had this discussion before, but Christian has
not on the internet.
Well,
I'm just kidding.
We're trying to be transparent here. We're trying to be transparent here, and so Christian has this badass lease, like has the age structure any person could dream of, and like he killed a 144-incher on opening day. Like the pressure, little to none there. And the thing is he has very little trail cam footage or data from the last 2 years he's had the lease that only led up to like November 5th or something like that. So he doesn't even have the good time of the year to see what's, maybe cruising through his property or anything like this. But he's in a super mindset where he's like age. He loves age. I don't disagree. Age is awesome, but any other lease, I'd be like, yeah, dude, shoot the first 5.5. Hell, I don't even care. 4.5-year-old deer you see, I don't care. But his lease is so primo that they have old deer walking around. Probably when I say a dime a dozen, probably a dime a dozen over 5.5. I'm not kidding. And I don't know, like he's not like totally against it or whatever, but it's taken some convincing to try to get him to, because I want to see him shoot that 150. You know what I mean? And like, I really think he can do it.
So he's shooting. So Christian, are you shooting not big enough deer, or so what do you want him to do, Jake? You want him to shoot smaller or bigger rack deer that are younger, or you want him to shoot?
Like I said, that thing could be a year and a half, and if that thing's a 160, freaking fire away.
A mature 150, which there are some around that size. Now you throw the maturity, we're talking 5.5. It's highly managed around this area, so if it could be a 4.5-year-old 160, and if I shoot it, I'm going to be on the lease next year, but people are going to be like, come on. Like that kind of thing. So it needs to be 5.5 and it needs to be 150. Just to put it into context, I've only hunted this lease 3 times. The first time I hunted it, I shot a 7.5-year-old, non-typical, just a weird deer. First morning I ever hunted it. The next year I hunted it opening morning. Shot it, like you said, a 144, 13 point. And then my other buddy that's on the lease, he got on it last year. He hunted it one morning and he shot a 6.5-year-old, probably low 130s type deer. So we've killed a 7.5, a 7.5, and a 6.5, and we've only hunted the property 3 times ever.
That's pretty incredible. That's crazy. What's the biggest deer you've ever killed?
144.
144.
Yep.
And so you don't want to shoot a bigger deer. So if a 155 walked by you on that place and he's 3 or maybe 4, you don't want to shoot him because you don't want to kill him, or because you don't want to upset the other people on the lease?
Well, there's so many mature deer on this property that it feels there's 2 things going on. One, it feels sacrilegious not to shoot a 6.5 or a 7.5-year-old deer. It feels wrong. And then on the other front of that, yes, I have such a good place to hunt that, to me, a 155-inch 3-year-old isn't worth running, not being able to hunt there anymore. Yeah.
Well, I think that honestly puts you in a tight situation, because if you have a place that's that good and you go and you shoot a deer that is, that is not as old of a deer or mature that you guys are trying to get to, which will lose you access to that place. Well, that kind of makes it difficult too, but at the same time, I still think that and if it makes you happy to shoot an old mature deer, I think there's nothing wrong with that either. But I would be on the fence as far as, one, how are you guys aging them? Is this from history, or are you sending them
history and tooth wear?
Yeah. Are you just looking at their teeth?
I have a tax. I mean, when I tell you that I take the teeth out, I've seen my taxidermist send me a picture of them. There is no molars left, like gone.
Okay.
So at least 5.5. I can't say, that deer's 7.5, 8.5, 9.5. But
this is just what the taxidermist said.
Yeah.
Have you ever looked into cementum annuli?
No.
So, I think you guys seem like somewhat statistical dudes too. That molars, so far, they did a study where they took molars and they gave them to biologists, and they were accurate 33% of the time. So, not very accurate, usually on their age. So, one is what I would tell you is, and I'm not saying that you guys are wrong at all, but what we found is usually, however old we think a deer it is, take off a year and then you're accurate. The average guy that's not spending that much time, take off 2 years and then you're accurate. And now we can say that it's been pretty accurate. So like this deer right here was that one on the pedestal.
Mm-hmm.
That deer was 8.5 years old, and that was cementum annuli. And so what they do is that you pull their bottom 2 front teeth of their jaw, and you send that into a lab, and then they cut that, and there's rings on those. Each year, those deer grow a new cementum ring, just like kind of like a tree root, and they're able to look at that, and it's supposedly it's a lot more accurate. I've heard some other people say that it's not as accurate. We've sent in probably 70 to 100 deer of our own now, between us and buddies and everybody else. And so far, it's pretty dang accurate, at least from what we're finding. I killed another deer this year that was 8.5, and I think he was 8. Yeah, so he was also 8, and we have pictures of him since 2016. And I mean, it's very clear and evident that it's absolutely the same deer, and that's exactly how old we thought he was. And so a lot of these deers, what we're finding is what people think they're shooting are 4, 5, 6-year-old deer are actually 3, 4, 5-year-old deer. Mm-hmm. And so we're seeing like 4 years old. Once they go 3 years old, seems to be 2 to 3, they make a big jump. Then 3 to 4, they make a really big jump. And then 4 to 5, they don't seem to do much. Like, and when I say not much, maybe 10 inches, right? But they're not doing like the 20, 30 inch jumps anymore. And then 5, it seems to be maybe another 10 inches. And then 6, if they're lucky, maybe another 10 inches. But at the same time, now you're talking 30-inch difference from 4 to 6. And then all of ours so far at 7, they start going downhill. And then at 8, they really go downhill. When I killed Bullwinkle, I mean, that was his 5-year-old antler, which would have been, if he hadn't broke off that tine, 80 some inches. And his best year, he was like, some other guy has it set. He'd have been 188. And then when I killed him, he was 172. And so, he'd shrunk about 16 inches. And the only reason though that he made it to that is because he had so much trash. His right side was 89, I think, and his left side was 67. So he was way lopsided, and just had started shrinking a ton. So the whole aging thing, I think, unless you have history with them, it's really, really, really difficult to actually know how old they are, at least from what we're seeing with the Cementa Manuali. And the only reason I'm willing to say anything on that is because we have sent in about 70 to 100 deer now, that I'm pretty comfortable with that amount of data from what we've been seeing.
Yeah, that ain't a very small sample size at all.
No, it's a pretty healthy one. And that's what's been fortunate about it, is that we have been able to keep a record on a lot of those deer and see, and so, like, I'll tell you right now though too, like, we have one deer this year that and I think is what happens as hunters, right, is we see a certain deer that you see him and you're like, man, that deer, look, he's probably a 3-year-old or he's a 2-year-old, but he's 160 inches. There's no 3. So he's 4. Or you see that he's a big deer and you make him 5 right away. My dad does that all the time. Makes deer 5, he wants to shoot him. Not because they actually are. He wants to make it okay with himself to shoot the deer. And I tell him, dude, we know the deer is young. We know he's probably only 3 or 4. Just shoot him. Just shoot him and be happy with him and just own it. You don't have to try to make him 5. And the reason I know he does that is because he'll go back and he'll look at trail camera pictures from years before, and he'll try to say, see, here he is. And it's like not even close. I'm like, dude, that's definitely not the same deer. And it, but he's just trying to justify it to himself, which he shouldn't have to do. I'm like, if the deer makes it happy, especially on your own ground, shoot the freaking deer. I just think we get a little bit too wrapped up in certain things of this. At the end of the day, it's a deer. Like, we get a little overkill. Like, sure, sometimes there's certain deer, if you get a 200 plus or something like that, it's a once in a lifetime opportunity. Absolutely. But like, I know we have one this year that last year I'm 99% sure he was 3, and he was 165 to 170. And if he shows up and he does what I think that he probably did, 15, 20 inches, Warren's trying to kill a 4-year-old. I promise you that.
Well, I wouldn't mean anything bad, like Christian was doing something awful, because that's probably the more studious and respectful thing to do, for that property and stuff like that. But I just want him to take a little step into the dark side where, like, you don't always have to shoot for age. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That one's tough though. I mean, when you have other people involved,
right,
that may have a say in whether you get to continue to hunt that place. Because you could definitely, let's take Christian's side for a second, and say, well, as long as I keep everybody happy, I can hunt that same place for another 5 years. And then what's the odds that I'm going to kill a 5 or a 6-year-old 160-inch deer?
That's true. That is very true. Yeah, I don't know. That's a tough one.
I feel like Jake is kind of like, hey, let's cash the chips in while we can. And he's like,
well, I mean, tomorrow isn't promised,
Yeah, that's true. Jake's like, let's make sure he's on the wall, and I'll just cry about it with him on the wall.
Yeah, I do have a deer there. So I've got 3 years of history with this place now. So I'm starting to get into that point where there are some bucks with unique characteristics that I'm like, okay, he was definitely 2 this year. And now I know for a fact, or at least to my confidence, that that's 3 or 4. Yeah. I got one now that I watched him all last year, and I was pretty sure he was a 3-year-old, just like a regular mainframe 8. And he had not a split, but like a big sticker point coming off of his base by the G2, almost like a dagger. And he's probably a mid-30s type deer. And he showed back up this year, and now he's the same 8, but he's got kickers off. He's got stickers off the bases, has that same dagger point, but he put the other one on the other side. And he's got this, and he's got mass. He's got a little bit of maturity on him, and he 100% would be the biggest scoring deer that I've ever shot. But it's a 4-year-old. I know for a fact. Like, when I look at him, I'm like, come on, eat more corn, get a bigger belly on you. Like, let me justify this, like you're saying. But right. I know this deer's not a 5-year-old deer. Yeah. So it makes it tough.
I think to start with, you guys should definitely start sending in your teeth, just because I try to get anybody I can to send in their teeth. So the more information that we can get on that, because if you're keeping tabs on them, and it's the same buck and everything, the more information we can get, then we can kind of all sit together and look at it. Because that's one thing I've started to really lean towards is that, like, if I have a deer that I really like and he's really heavy or something, and he's 150, 160 inch 4-year-old, but there's something unique about him, I'm probably going to shoot him, because it does not seem like there's that many. We're not getting that many 4-year-olds that go from 4 to 5 and make some really big jump. It seems like once they kind of get to 4, like they're 90% to 95% of what they're going to be. Now that could be a little bit different. Like if I had a 4-year-old that was right around that 170 range, and I take all of them on a case by case basis. If he lives right in the center of us, and 90% of the places that he goes, he's probably not going to get off of us, and we know that he's got a really good chance of making it. Yeah, that deer I might roll the dice with. But some of these other ones where I had one a few years ago that I wish I'd have put a lot more weight into trying to kill. His name was Hammer, and I found his shed. His one antler was 3.1 pounds. He's just a 4-point. I mean, it was, yeah, dude, it's stupid. Like the base it's just humongous. The deer, and he wasn't the highest scoring deer. He was probably 160 or something like that, but just a straight 8. I mean, it was pretty much just a baseball bat on his head. I mean, just unbelievable mass. And that deer, looking back now, like if I'd have known he lived just on the fringe of us, and if I'd have known where he was and known the information I ended up knowing about him later on when he was 4, I'd have gone all in on trying to kill that deer, because he wasn't in on us that much. So my chances of killing him weren't very good anyways. So there would have been a limited window that I'd had to try to kill him. So I take a lot of them on a case by case basis, but if your goal is just to kill a mature deer too, then I think there's nothing wrong with that either. Like my late muzzleloader tag every year, I just dedicate that to a deer that is an old deer that we want to try to get rid of. Like I could have a 170 inch 4-year-old walk out right in front of me, and I wouldn't be tempted at all. I'd much rather shoot a 130 inch old bruiser or something than that with my late muzzleloader tag than a tanker of a young buck. I'd rather chase him with my bow the next year.
Yeah, herein lies some of the problem, because this place that we're talking about that I hunt is the likelihood of one surviving if you pass it is like really good, just because of how it lays out, the river, the composition. I am
Neighbors are
good friends with the neighbors, and just the isolation of this property. I'm like, man, I know I'm 80% sure that I can get this deer through. And I don't know. It's kind of a dilemma too, because my wall is starting to fill up, and I don't have a home improvement or a home expansion is not in my near future, and my wife's not letting me put any in the living room. So yeah. I'm like at this point, kind of this crossroad where I'm like, okay, it kind of makes sense where I can start waiting out for not only an older age class deer, but a deer that kind of tickles my fancy in terms of score, because previously we didn't grow up in a place that had a ton of big deer. So, me being able to go and shoot a mature deer every season, I'm like, oh, that's like awesome. That's as good as it gets. And now I'm to the point now where I don't have to do that to be fulfilled, but it's kind of an internal battle, I think.
Yeah, there's definitely something to I'm at a point now where that one 4-year-old in particular, he would be the exception to the rule. If he does what I think he does, he better watch out. He's on the hit list. But most of them, I've been fortunate, like I've said, to kill a lot of good deer. And so to me, there wouldn't be near as much, I wouldn't be near as proud of a 4-year-old 160, 170 inch deer as I would be even 160 inch 5 or 6-year-old deer. But that's the stage that I'm at. I've been fortunate and blessed to live in Iowa, where we have a lot of deer like that and been able to kill some. So, but I'm kind of with Jake at the same time. Like when I was younger in my career, if I'd had and I hate calling it career, it's not a career, lifestyle. When I was younger in my deer hunting lifestyle and the biggest deer of my life walked by, age was kind of like the last thing I was thinking about.
Now, there's a difference between like private and public where we're at too, though, because like private, I think it's a little bit higher standards just because it's more of I mean, obviously, yeah, it's a more controlled environment, but like, I know Christian's mindset and like public, he's with you and I. Like that thing could be a year and a half years old, and if it's the biggest deer, then 100%. Like he's going to pull the trigger. But and I wasn't trying to sound like an ass. Like you need to kill this. But
no, it sounds to me like you're watching out for your buddy. You're saying, I want to see you kill.
I'm trying to because like, damn, I know he can do it. That's the thing, because like on my private, I've hunted it for years, probably since like 2016. And this year would be the biggest buck that has made it to this maturity. And like this year, honest to God, he might be like 160s. Last year, I think he was like, how big do you think he was last year?
Probably low 50s.
So, and we think that he was 4 that year. We just think. And then this year we're thinking he's probably 5, maybe 6. And I'm almost positive he would probably be either high 50s or low 60s, I would think. And like, that's one deer. That's one deer that has got that big. Okay. Scratch that. There's 2 deer that's ever got that big on that property. And the 7-8 years I've hunted it. And it's just like, I know he can get that, especially on his property if he has age class. Cause most of the 3.5-year-olds around here, they get popped by the neighbors, and some of them get popped by me too. But that's beside the point.
What kind of deer get on that place, Christian? Like, is there some? It sounds like there's lots of 100. There could be several 150 plus type kind of deer.
Yeah. So, like Jake said, I've always ran out of like cell cam storage before I ever ran out of battery, and so I don't have a picture. And the last couple of years I've been very fortunate. I've tagged out in before October or November 5th, 2 or 3 years in a row in Oklahoma. So I shot multiple bucks before then. And so I don't have a ton of data from then, but I bet the biggest deer that's ever came through there was probably a low 50s type deer. And there's maybe over the 3 years I've been there, and these are just summer picks, so I don't put a ton of weight into them, but 2 or 3 that are that size over a 3-year period of time. And so I'm not saying the genetic ceiling isn't way higher than that, because I don't know. And I know those 160 type bucks they're unicorns in most places. So I just know that a 5.5-year-old buck that's going to be 150 or better, they're not behind every tree.
Yeah. Man, that'd be tough. I mean, especially, I think if even the mature deer were only getting to like the low 50s, I think I'd be more inclined to shoot the younger ones that were 150.
Yeah. I'm so glad we had you on this podcast. It's been great.
Well, I'm just like I'm not trying to take sides. I'm just trying to think about this. Like, if I was in the same position, like if you'd have said, there was these mature deer are hitting the 160 mark and there's 5 or 6. But then I'd be like, I probably would be just waiting on one of those, or be trying to wait on one of the older ones and see if I could stick one of them. But if a 4-year-old gets to high 40s or 150, and the 5-year-olds are only getting to 150, and I'd never killed one of that caliber, I'd probably be shooting it. But back to my original statement, I think Christian should be doing the same thing as I would tell you, Jake. Whatever's making Christian happy to shoot, I think you should be shooting. However, I don't think you should be using your wall as an excuse, because I had no idea where I was going to put that elk, and I still got it mounted. My taxman called me, and he's like, dude, you do realize like this form that you chose is probably like you could not take up any more room. And I'm like, don't worry about it. Whatever makes the bull look the best, that's all I want. And so that's the reason my deer is still on the ground, because now I'm having to figure out where the frick to put them. So shoot whatever you want, but you can't use that as an excuse not to shoot them.
That's fair. I mean, I don't know. If an 85-inch 5 or 6-year-old came in, it would be very hard for me not to just run an arrow through both lungs, because I just think there's not a more beautiful sight than a deer running off spraying, and I'm just like, that one's done. I love shooting deer. Last year, I think I shot 6 or 7 deer. If I could shoot 10 a year, I'd be very happy. So it's very hard. It's very hard to hold back on. If a mature one comes in, I'm like, I want to put one through him.
How many buck tags can you guys get?
2 in Oklahoma, 2 in
Well,
Oklahoma.
2
Yeah.
buck tags and 4 doe.
Yep.
2 buck tags and 4 does. Yeah. Well, maybe you need to find somewhere else that it doesn't affect your buddies on the lease, and then you just try to find the biggest deer that you can on there, shoot one there. You know, if you can try and find a 145 or a 150 and shoot that one there, and then you can go and hunt the mature deer on the other place.
You're full of good ideas.
We're just looking at options, you know, because I'll say that too. But like my dad and we got a good buddy here named Shane, and the dude is just ate up with deer, and he won't admit it because he tries not to do it. But like each of them, they'll pick out one deer, you know, one deer that they're gonna try to chase. My brother did that actually too last year, and I had already been down that road, and I've done the same thing before, and I've decided I'll probably never do that again. Like I may pick out that one deer, but my second round draft picks are right there. Like I've got other deer that are on the radar that I'm keeping an eye on, just because I think that sometimes we get our hearts set on this one deer, you know, to the point where like they go missing for a week, and like people almost getting sick, you know, they're like, oh my God, where is he? And they're so stressed over this deer. And so after Bullwinkle was that one for me. Like he didn't stress me out to a crazy amount because I never actually thought I'd kill him. The deer was so much smarter than me that I never actually thought I was going to get an opportunity at him. And so then when I got really fortunate and killed that one, he kind of relieved all the stress for trying to kill a specific deer for me. And so after that, I was like, I'm never picking out one deer again because it took some of the fun out of it. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, I may pick out one and say, hey, this is the one I really want to kill. But I got 2 or 3 other deer that I'm like, I'd be super happy with shooting them too, just for the event that either he gets killed early or he gets hit by a car or the deer just leaves. Because I don't want to, that was the whole reason I didn't spend a ton of time hunting hammer, was because if I was going to hunt that deer, there was one place that I could sit and actually possibly kill that deer. And I didn't want to spend 20 days sitting in the same stand. I was like, I don't have the interest in doing that. That's the same reason I get lots of crap, because I'll never, ever do an all day sit. Doesn't matter if it's November 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th. I don't care. Unless if I've got like a 240 or something like that, that the only way I think I can kill him is between 10 and 2, then I might sit all day. But other than that, Warren Holder will never sit all day. And the reason is I don't have the attention span, and it takes the fun out of it. And so to me, we deer hunt, and we hunt because we're passionate about it and we love it. And so if I'm having to make it a job to keep myself sitting in that stand all day, now what am I doing? The whole point originally was to go do something I love to do and had fun doing. So I will be the guy that I get out at 9:30 or 10, and I'm going to go get some McDonald's and take a break, maybe take a nap, and then I'm going back to my stand. But my hat's off to the guys that can sit all day, but I'm not going to do it.
I think we get along just fine if you wanted to go get a Mickey D's break in the middle.
Yeah, I'm all in, man. Breakfast, like, dude, there is nothing better than having like a pretty good morning and it's chilly, and then like going and getting pancakes. Like,
oh yeah.
Like that to me is like borderline right along with having a good sit of seeing some good deer, you know, like some pancakes and eggs when it's really cold out and it's been like a nice morning. Like that's real close.
Oh yeah. I liked what you said though. I think there's, in this pursuit of whitetails, which, you know, they go from the Northeast to the South to literally all the way out to Montana, the different strokes for different folks is very apparent. Like there's some people that will only shoot for score, only shoot for age. And I think it's cool that everybody can kind of make it what they want to get out of it.
Absolutely. Yep. For sure. Yeah. It's taken a life of its own, I feel like, with the social media world now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely think so too. So
speaking of that, hold on. You brought up social media, and I got a pretty good kick out of a lot of y'all's TikToks about how people guess the score. And I know some people troll you, you know, because I seen one where it was like I don't know what deer it was or how much it scored, but it was a freaking giant. And one dude said 135. I don't know if he was trolling or being serious or whatever.
That was me on my alt.
Yeah. But what's that like for you guys? Like whenever you go to try to score, because you're I don't think a whole lot of people know this, but like you're an actual official scorer, are you not?
Yes. Yep.
So some would say you would know how to score a deer.
Or
Yeah.
should. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I should know what I'm doing. So that deer was actually Juice that people did. And I'll be 100% honest that with that TikTok, I definitely baited people. I did that intentionally. And the reason I did that is because I get really, really irritated with seeing all these scoring experts that rip the average dude that just wants to share his something he's excited about.
Right.
So what I'm talking about is a guy that posts a deer and he's like, check out my 9-point or whatever, and he was 151. And you can never look at that and see a bunch of comments of people saying, yeah, that deer, that's an awesome deer, man. Look at the G2s, or that's a super cool buck, or whatever. It's always, that deer's not 151. He's not 151. I want to see the score sheet. I want to see the score sheet. I want to see the score sheet. And to me, which is kind of funny because here I am, an official scorer, but I'm also looking at it from an official scorer standpoint. And a lot of times, some of the deer I'm looking at, and I'm like, you guys didn't score that deer right. Like, that deer's bigger, and people have no clue. Like, the very, very first thing you tell me, if you tell me that, well, that looks like the one that I have on my grandma's wall, and my grandpa shot it back in 1996, and it was 27 inches wide, and it only went 136. That deer's not 151. Anytime you're comparing two deer to try to score one, you're telling me that you have no idea what you're looking at, because you can't do that. Like, deer just are made up so different that you can't do that. It just doesn't work, because you can take a deer, take my deer Bullwinkle, for instance. Most people think that deer's 190, which if he matched, he would be 190. But at the same time, if you look at the score sheet and you really look at him, his beams are 18 inches because he was so old, so that right there shrinks him up. And so I posted the video of Juice running in, and said, with that moment when you have a 180 coming in, knowing that there would be all the scoring experts coming out saying it's 135, and then that I could do a follow-up video showing Juice, and that the deer is absolutely massive, and they're calling it a 135, just to kind of like poke back a little bit, and just to fight back a little bit to those guys. So honestly, it doesn't bother me at all, because I do know the score of them, and it's not that big of a deal. And where a lot of that came from is I felt really bad for a dude, because I'm in a shed hunting group. Like, I'm a shed hunting freak. And this dude posted a picture of a shed that he found and he said it was 76 inches. Right. And there was literally, I still remember this day, there was 214 comments on that post. And literally every single one of them was telling the dude that the antler wasn't 76 inches. And it got to the point that the guy deleted it. Right. So he deleted this post because 213 people or 14 people all had to tell him that this antler is not 76 inches. And looking at it, because you guys know, if you take a picture of a shed, you can never tell how big they actually are. No. And I mean, like, I was like, that probably is 76 inches, but let's just say it's not. Who cares? What does it change? What does it change? If that antler was not 76 inches, he didn't claim that it was a world record. He didn't claim it was the biggest 5-point antler ever found. He didn't claim that it was top 10. I mean, what does he have to gain from lying about that? But at the end of the day, too, what does it affect you? What gain is there of that other than just trolling somebody? It's for no reason. So that stuff doesn't, I guess that was a really long-winded answer, but it doesn't bother me at all. Like, not even an ounce.
Well, for the most part, you kind of know that there's going to be some bolt holes out there that just like to pick on people. But like, some days I wake up and, you just have those mornings. You're just like, screw this dude. Cause like you get on your phone and you see like a notification on YouTube or something. Someone leaves a comment, but it's like, it must be nice shooting them over a feeder or something like that. And she's like, yeah, it must've been nice buying those 6 bags of corn. That's $13 a piece. And which that's probably low for you all, but like to fill my feeders, like I get pissed when I have to do that. I'm like, these suckers are too fat. Like I don't need to be feeding them. I want to lower this down to 1 second a spin or something along those lines. And then, like Christian's lease, he has a little bit of ag around on one of his feed, or it ain't ag. It's like a little food plot and then a feeder. And then that's where the comment originated from. It's just like, oh yeah, it must be nice having a food plot and hunting areas like that. And like, I'm fortunate where I have family land to hunt, but like, I'm sure it ain't fun. And I'm sure it's just unfortunate whenever his lease money comes out of his bank account and stuff like that. And I feel like that's what a lot of people don't understand about this is like, yeah, we're using bait in a state where we can hunt over bait. And it's like, what's the big deal?
Yeah. The thing too is what's preventing you from doing that. So
True.
why can't you go and lease something? Why can't you put in a food plot? Why can't you do that? And I guarantee you the reason is an excuse. I don't have the money to do that. Okay. Well, why don't you have the money? Because you're working in a job that doesn't pay you enough, or okay, well then develop a skill set that somebody's willing to pay you more for. You don't have the time. Okay. Do you have the money? If you have the money, can you hire somebody else to do something to be able to create the time? There is always options. The reason that you can go put a food plot in is because of whatever decisions you made to put yourself in the position that you are, right? The reason that I would rather, to me, going on a Yukon moose hunt where I may have to work hard and find a way to make 40K to spend on that, but it's more risky for me to try to say that I'm going to basically play the lottery and hope that sometime before I die, I'm going to draw a Shiras moose tag for a smaller moose than holding myself accountable and saying that I'm going to find a way to be able to make this money so that I can go and do something that I want to do. The only reason I have a hard time, unless there's somebody who's from really bad circumstances or they're disabled in some way, or there's some other reason there. I think that the only reason that you can't do that, what can't put in a food plot or can't go get a lease or can't get permission, is because you're not trying hard enough to figure out a way to do that. You're just making an excuse.
Yeah, that's so true. It's the must be nice guys. Oh, that must be nice. It is pretty nice paying for this.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. They don't talk about the working side of it. My biggest deer, that deer Magnum, I killed that deer on a permission piece, and I killed him on, and I haven't told anybody else that, but I killed him on a permission piece that knocked on doors, and I'm not the only person that has permission to hunt it either. And there's no food plots. I told you guys I shot him basically on a cow pasture, and I guess I'm comfortable enough that I like the fact that most people think that I shot that deer on a food plot on a farm that nobody else can hunt. Like, you guys just keep thinking that. Like, that's good. That's good with me because I don't have to worry about, you follow me around or any weird stuff like that. And then I still go out and get a lot of permission. I'd spend a lot of time shed hunting, and I build a lot of relationships with landowners, and they give me permission to hunt. And I have places that I can go and hunt exclusively or on a lease, and I can do that. But a lot of times I'll go and hunt. I'll keep these relationships and build those relationships with those landowners, and I'll go hunt those properties just because I like finding different deer. Like I've found, I guess, that I'm a weird guy because, like, my dad and brother, they only want to find sheds to deer they know. To me, there's like nothing that'd be more exciting than finding like an 80-inch antler to a deer I've never seen. Like, to me, that would be
it's the mystery.
Yeah, absolutely. So I go and get ridiculous amount. 2 years ago, I spent an unhealthy amount of time getting permission on a whole bunch of places. And it's not like any of these people knew that I had a TV show or anything, right? They're farmers and landowners, like they could care less. And so I spent a ton of time because I figured if I walked enough miles, then I was going to find an 80-inch antler. And I walked like 200 and some, and I didn't find an 80-inch antler. But is what I learned about myself was that I loved walking a new place because of the mystery. Like around every corner, there was probably a dude that hunted that place, and he knew that the biggest deer that was on there the entire time was never over 150. But to me, there was a 200 there. Like all I'm looking at is, wow, this looks really good, and look at all these trails and this and that. Like there's going to be a 90-inch antler up here somewhere. And to me, that mystery kept it super, super exciting. And I still do that to this day. And so I love being able to go and put a camera somewhere and not knowing exactly what deer could be there.
So I have to ask, what's the biggest shed you ever found?
This one, which is Bullwinkle.
Oh,
and it's,
I get you.
yeah. And it's with that broke, it's 76, which I found like 4 or 5 antlers now, I think, that are all 76. And several of them, if I'd found the other side, they were 80. And so now I have like this weird obsession with wanting an 80-inch antler. And so like 2 years ago, I walked 200 some miles thinking that for sure, if I spent that amount of time and walked that many miles in Iowa, I'd find a 200-inch antler. And what I learned was that most of the places that I was able to get permission on, well, they'd given other people permission too. And so now is what I was doing, where even though I was walking all the time, that was some other guy's one spot. And so he would go and walk that and he'd clean it up. Right. And I can't cover all of those different places at once. So, I mean, basically I just ended up trying to pick up leftovers. So like my sheds per mile was way down. The longest I'd had was 20 miles. I had a 20-mile stretch where I hadn't found an antler, and I was getting like really, really pissed because I just couldn't find an antler. And then I found, and honestly, it's one of my favorite antlers to this day. I found this one, and it's not that big, but it's a baby giant. And so that was the 20-mile shed. And so I've always kept this one because that was my longest dry spell between antlers. And then I found that one.
You're talking to two people who could walk 20 miles, and we'd have to trip over a shed to be able to
go through the bottom of the boot to find it.
Oh, it's awful.
Some people got the eyes for it and other people don't.
do.
Like we shed hunted a piece of public land. We probably put, I don't know, 7 or 8 miles on during a day. And our buddy shows up the next day and he's like, I text him at noon. I'm like, we're leaving. And he texts me. He's like, why? I found 8 this morning. I'm like, you what? You found 8? And he sends me a picture of like a 65-inch shed. And I was like, dude, I just don't have the eyes for it, I guess. Same place.
You guys walked?
Not the same place we walked, but the same property. And I mean, we were walking the same terrain features that he was. I mean, I don't know. I guess there's some luck into it too, but I just feel like my eyes aren't for it.
I find that a lot though, where I'll find antlers in a patch like that, like a bunch. And I don't know what it is, but especially on hard winters, like if you have a really hard winter where you may walk everything else and you don't find anything, and then you'll hit one patch and you'll find 8, 10, 12 antlers. I had one time where it was a super tough winter and I found 10 antlers within a 100-yard radius. It was crazy. I mean, it was just like all the bucks are just like bedded in the same place and all drop their antlers in the same place. It was nuts. But you definitely your eyes can get trained to it. Like I'll even take an antler out with me a couple times, the first times, and chuck it out there and cover my ears so I don't hear it, and then make my eyes pick it out. But like, I don't ever look for antlers. I look for like oddly straight lines in the woods is a great way, because you not very often that you're going to see something, with the exception of like a cornfield. That's why cornfields suck. But like a tine is pretty straight, like when you see something like that, those two things sticking up, there's not a lot of things naturally in the woods that are that straight.
Yeah. The ones that I typically find are like bleach white or tines up. Those are the two that I find. Like we hunt a place where a lot of the antlers are like dark chocolate. And so they blend in good. They blend in really, really good. So
can be tough.
Is there, let's talk about maybe foreshadowing a little bit for this fall, just to kind of wrap up here. What's the fall plans? Are you going out west to hunt anything? Are you trying to stick around Iowa after a big one, or what do you got coming up for the fall?
I'm going out west. I'm going to Colorado, but not.
Thought you didn't like it.
Talking crap, huh?
No, for elk. I drew a mule deer tag, and
nice.
So I drew a mule deer tag, and and so this is kind of funny because this kind of goes to what Jake was saying earlier. Like my first deer ever was actually a mule deer because I grew up in Montana, and now I've been fortunate to kill a lot of whitetails and a few good elk. So the next one that I want is like a good mule deer, right? So for me, the goal is if I kill like 140-inch mule deer, 150-inch mule deer, I'll be stoked. And I've had a whole bunch of guys tell me, they're like, dude, where you're going in Colorado and the units you can hunt, you need to be trying to kill something bigger than that. And I'm like, I got years to try and kill the bigger one. If 140, 150 inch meat out in front of me, it's getting smoked. So I'm going out there for mule deer, and then there's one unit of the tag I have. I can hunt a couple different units, and so there's one unit that I could also hunt elk in, just an over-the-counter elk tag. And I'm really, really trying to get myself to not go hunt mule deer in that unit, because I know there's going to be a lot of dudes in there and a lot of guys elk hunting. But I'm also just terrified that I'm going to go mule deer hunting in one of these other units and then have a bull like screaming below me, and that it's just going to absolutely torture me. So I'm really trying to force myself to go to one of the other units and not buy an elk tag too, and then be playing the both game. But I don't know if I'll have the self-control to do it or not. So that's left to be determined. Maybe I'll get lucky and kill a mule deer early, and then I'll go and chase elk. But if not, then in later September, me, my dad, and my brother are all going to New Mexico, and we're going to hunt elk with the Primos guys. And so my little brother is going to be up first, and we're going to try and get him his first elk with his bow. So that I'm really stoked for that one. And we're going to try and pull some strings and possibly even get Mr. Primos himself involved in that hunt if we can. So that would be really, really cool. I told my little brother, I was like, man, I might punch you if that happens, because for you to get going your first elk hunt and have the man, the myth, and the legend there for it, that'd be pretty cool. So, and then just aside from there, we'll be chasing deer here.
How about this? I'll hold out for a 5.5-year-old 150, but you can't hunt the elk and muley at the same time. You got to just go for the muley. We'll virtually handshake on it.
I don't know. I think maybe you should just let me think about that, because I need the encouragement. I know that the right thing to do is to just go chase a mule deer in a different unit, but I'm having a hard time getting myself to commit to it.
Well, yeah, you ranked elk on your number one, so you're ate up with it.
I know. Well, and it's just like, I'm like, well, I could be mule deer hunting, and I'll just scout for elk while I'm mule deer hunting. And like every time I find myself scouting, I like just keep ending up in that unit, and I really need to try to stay away from it. But
well, I'll tell you this to help you out a little bit. When's the next time after this year that you'll be back in that unit?
For elk or for mule deer?
Either one.
Well, mule deer would probably be about 2 or 3 years, because I have to draw.
Oh, that ain't too bad then.
Yeah. So, but elk, I mean, the one I could go back next year. I'd have to look and see how many it would take to draw the same units for elk. Maybe that'd be a good way to look at it. Is maybe I should be using that to scout for next year or 2 years or whatever, and gathering points for that unit. That might be a good idea.
There you go.
Yeah.
Is there a big whitetail that I know you said that you kind of hold it loosely with having a number one and having the number 2s and 3s and 4s pretty close, but is there a particular buck you're after this fall that has got you excited?
Honestly, I don't really have one. I've got 2 that are like on my radar. The one is going to be this 4-year-old. I want to see what he does. If he just does maybe 10 inches or something from like last year, I probably won't really chase him. If he does 20 inches, then he's in trouble. But then there's another one that I had, and I don't know if the deer made it or not. So that's a big outlier, I guess. If he did make it, I have an 8 that I passed last year when I was trying to kill Magnum. That was probably, he wasn't huge. He was probably mid 50s, but for an 8, he was
a big 8.
Yeah, that's a huge 8.
And he's got gnarly tines and stuff. Like they're kind of bladed and wavy, and he's just a heavy deer. And so, but I'm not sure he's alive. I don't know if he's alive or not. But if he's alive and I can get pictures of him, I might chase him, because he's just a cool deer, and I would really like to stick an arrow in him. But other than that, I don't have usually there ends up being a deer, that there's just been some history with, or someone that was really tripped my trigger. And I got fortunate and killed Magnum last year, and I haven't had another deer that really showed up on the radar yet. So we'll have to still see what comes up this summer. There's a lot of time left for a big buck to show up.
Do you guys put any weight into hunting other states for whitetail, or because you're going after all these other species as well, do you just kind of focus only on Iowa for whitetail?
We pretty much only focus on Iowa because it's so hard to leave Iowa when it comes to the deer, and then between all of us, we'll either have my dad, my brother, my mom hunts too. My mom last year, she hunted for literally, I guess, I don't even know if you could say 3 minutes. Like her and I together have the best luck ever. We were getting up in the stand and I hear a deer coming. Like she just got up in the stand and I'm told her, I'm like, and I look over and see a good deer, like 145, 150 inch deer. I'm like, and so I'm telling her, I'm like, pull your bow up right away. And she's like, what? Because she's like putting her coat on, so that she doesn't get cold. And I was like, toss your coat, pull your bow up. Literally, she pulls up her bow, as the deer's at like 40 yards coming by, manages to get to full draw and shoots him at 20, and we were done. Like, it was wild. I mean,
That's
wild.
my kind of hunt.
Oh, dude, it was crazy. But so then my girlfriend hunts, and then if we get lucky and we manage to punch all of our tags, then we'll take the camera guys too, and go and try and kill them a deer. So it's pretty hard for us to leave Iowa. I know my dad would really like to try to do the velvet deal and go maybe to Kentucky or somewhere and try and kill a velvet deer. I liked going to Missouri and not trying to kill a tanker, just killing a decent deer. That was really fun. But we haven't put that much weight in other states.
Well, I think in the next couple of years, Oklahoma is going to have a velvet season.
Don't
Really?
apply, but we might.
Don't apply, yeah.
You probably shouldn't even be talking about it on here then.
Yeah,
I'm a resident. I don't care.
Right?
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you do quite a bit of antelope hunting? I see some good ones behind you. We're thinking about going to Nebraska over the counter for antelope. So we got eat up with it in Oklahoma. I want to shoot one so bad. So does Jake.
Yeah. I've done a lot of antelope hunting. Actually, this is the first year in probably I don't know, 10 or 15 years that I'm not going to be going antelope hunting because we didn't draw Wyoming for the first time ever. Which really sucks because we never even had we always drew. And so they had a lot of winter kill and stuff that happened this year. And so I don't know if that moved people, the units that they put in for or what. I guess it must have because we didn't draw, but I haven't hunted Nebraska. Do you have like an idea of where you're going to go? Or is it you're going to just do the public land thing and you're going to try to do spot and stock or what?
We're going to do the public land thing. Yeah, spot and stock. We haven't done it on public in the past. In Oklahoma, we had a good in on private, tens of thousands of acres, and it was
land under
awesome.
tag.
Yeah, land under tags. Okay. But yeah, no, it would be over the counter on public.
Is South Dakota over the counter too?
I think they have some. They might. I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, are you wanting to sit in blinds, or have you thought about how you're going to try and kill one?
I love spot and stalking them.
Yeah,
we've killed a couple. Jake and I have both killed 2 does with our rifles, and then we've bow hunted them before. And the spotting and stalking with the bow, and I think it's hard to beat for the adrenaline.
Oh yeah. I've killed a few of them spot and stock now. Like now, I can't sit in a blind anymore and hunt antelope. Just it's too boring and too hot. So that's all I do: spot stock. And if there's cattle around, we've used a cow decoy, and that works really well. Now I don't know how well it would work on public. That could be a completely different ball game. And the thing is too, if there's not cattle around, the antelope freak out. Like there's got to be they got to be around a lot of cows pretty frequently for them to kind of write it off. But that's worked really well. I've killed 2 or 3 that way. I had our buddy, a rancher. I walked behind a horse and shot one, and then spot and stalked 2 or 3 now. And the way I've always spot and stalked them is I don't really hunt the antelope. I hunt the terrain. So I don't try to, if you're going to go out and try and hunt spot and stalk an antelope where it's a football field and they have phenomenal vision, I think it's really kind of a waste of time just because it's going to be almost impossible. So we've had a few places where there's actually pretty decent terrain. There's some steep cuts and some stuff that you can actually work with to be able to get close to them. And that's what I've always done for spot and stock is I don't worry so much about the antelope density. I just worry about trying to find one that is in that location where I could actually get close to them. Mm-hmm. So, and then if I was you guys, I'd be trying to go during the week if you're doing public, you know?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's in the plan.
Yeah.
But hey, man, we really appreciate you doing this.
Yeah.
We really appreciate you dealing with the technical difficulties and putting up with us for over 2 hours on the podcast.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah, we'll definitely do this again sometime. Thank you so much. If people want to connect with you, watch the show, where's the best place for them to do that?
Race Hunting website. You can go to, just racehunting.com and everything's on there. Or if you want to, we're on all social, Race Hunting TikTok, Race Hunting Instagram, Race Hunting Facebook. And you can find me on all those too. Warren at Race Hunting on Instagram. But yeah, we're pretty easy to find. Look up Race Hunting and we should pop up somewhere.
Thank you guys so much for checking out the Hunter's Advantage podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure to leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to the podcast. Thank you guys so much, and we'll see you in the next episode.